Just a quick disclaimer, as always, there are no forward-looking statements in this presentation, and this call will be recorded. My name is Caroline. I'm the Chief of Staff at Edge and Node. An overview for our agenda today includes a snapshot of Q4 2023, roadmap updates, new era of the graph, a GIP update, ecosystem updates from the Graph Foundation, network stats, concluding remarks from Edge and Node CEO Tegan Klein, and a Q&A that I'll be dropping the link throughout this presentation. And with that, I'll kick it off to our CFO, Max Tang, to start us off on the 2023 snapshot.
Thanks, Caroline. So we changed the format of this presentation this quarter to give a more data-heavy view of the protocol. So let us know what you think. Let's take a look at the snapshot. So fourth quarter query fee in US dollars was $22,000. It represents a decline of about 9% quarter over quarter and a decline of about 83% year over year. So query fee stabilized after several quarters of decline. This decline was mainly due to pricing configuration changes in the gateway. As we see in the chart in the middle, query volume actually grew 65% quarter over quarter and 71% year over year. From first quarter 22 to fourth quarter 23, so 2 years time span, query volume grew by an annualized rate of 121%. So the growth is driven by both the increase in subgraph deployments and the number of projects using the protocol. One thing to note is that in December 2023, we unfortunately had a billing outage in Studio for 3 weeks. This pushed about $6,000 worth of query fees into first quarter 24. So the biggest project we executed this quarter was the migration to L2. We appreciate the support of everybody on the call. As we see from the chart on the left, we started in September close to 0% on L2. Then to incentivize migration, the protocol moved about 25% of rewards to L2 on December 10th, then 50% on September 26th. Then 2 months later, 95% of rewards are on L2. Now we have about 83% of stake on L2. Please be noted the number is provisional, as operating across 2 layers massively increase the complexity of our infrastructure. And we're still trying our best to compare these numbers across different sources. But in general, we're pretty happy about this execution. One thing to note is that L2 makes microtransactions feasible. For example, we had a flurry of delegations of 50 GRT each on L2, which wasn't economically feasible on L1. The chart in the middle shows that as of year end, about 60% of query fees are on L2, and about 63% of query volume is on L2. The chart on the right shows that L2 is now dominating subgraph deployment with 263 subgraphs created on L2 in fourth quarter and only 65 on L1. As a reminder, once 95% of stake is on L2, the protocol will move 100% of rewards there. After that, the protocol will continue to operate on L1, but indexers and delegators will no longer receive inflation rewards. Other than L2 migration, another significant initiative that we kicked off in fourth quarter was Sunrise. Just to recap, Sunrise is essentially porting the entire hosted service to the network. The technical details are, of course, more complicated than porting, but the effort, in essence, makes hosted service subgraphs readily available on the network. This is a huge project with 3 phases: Sunray, Sunbeam, and Sunrise. In fourth quarter 23, we completed a significant step in Sunray by spinning up a upgrade indexer. Now with the upgrade indexer, we have all chains, all hosted subgraphs supported on the network. If an existing user wants to switch to the network, their subgraph is readily available and there's no longer a need to sync from Genesis block. This was a big blocker for projects to switch. Now it's removed. Overall, we are pretty happy about our execution. We're still aiming to complete Sunrise in second quarter 24. Now, let me turn it over to Eva.
Thanks, Max. Next slide, Caroline. So we wanted to revisit and just kind of reshare where we're at in terms of the network proposition over the hosted service. As you might have known, we launched Upgrade Indexer in December, which basically means fallback indexing on the network. So now every chain that is on the hosted service can be used on the network as well. And now we're also going through a process of enabling indexing rewards for all those chains too. So indexers are fully incentivized. But really, coming back to the network is open source, it's permissionless, it's also very competitive in terms of the cost and latency. So we're seeing 99.99% uptime. Our latency is at around 123 milliseconds, but we're seeing that come down as new indexers hop on new subgraphs, and also as we start optimizing for specific use cases. We have no vendor lock-in. That's one of the benefits of the network, is that you're relying on a network of indexers that are all competing to provide you the best service, but that you can opt out at any time, or you can even change your kind of parameters for what kind of indexing you want. And we've got a decentralized ecosystem of support. So we've got a few teams that are directly involved to provide you the direct access to your subgraphs or build the subgraphs for you, and then also to even help you triage. So really, the network has come a long way. It's been about 3 years since we launched, and we feel really good about where it's at and kind of what's to come for the next year. Recapping the roadmap that we launched in Q4, we've got 5 main pillars. So just going from left to right, developer empowerment. Again, this is really, optimizing the UX, making sure developers are having the best experience. A lot of that work is what drove the Upgrade Indexer and is driving Sunrise. Optimizing indexer performance, pretty standard. We have a lot of ongoing work on the graph node side, Firehose, and even indexers themselves to make sure they are the best for each type of subgraph, substream, or use case. Protocol evolution and resiliency. A lot of this is related to Horizon, which I'll share a bit more later. Interconnected graph of data, really a new area that we're beginning to focus on, which is how can you envision actually organizing the data in Web3 and in the world, not just providing access to it as the graph does today. So that's things like composability, making sure that there's actual value being extracted from the combination of data. And then lastly, in this really large bubble, is World of Data Services, which is one of our largest focuses at the moment, which is expanding to different kinds of data and use cases on the graph. So instead of just subgraphs and substreams, which are fantastic, they've got product market fit, but they only serve very specific use cases. We want to make sure that the graph serves all use cases. So we're really focusing on SQL. We're starting to look into AI and even working with some AI teams to understand what that looks like, verifiable data, even getting more into file storage and file sharing. And the goal here is that any kind of data need should be served on the graph ultimately. Next slide. Diving in a bit more to SQL, just so everyone can kind of wrap their head around. So obviously SQL is one of the largest languages that's used today by analysts and also devs. And we really came to a conclusion that this was important not only for the analyst community, but actually a lot of our current users would prefer to query in SQL. Some of their use cases are a little bit more analytics focused. And so this is one of our Q1 priorities, is to ship SQL. And we're already talking to a few exciting teams that are really interested, and this could elevate their own front-end experience. The other exciting one is Substream SQL. So it actually builds on the SQL work. But the difference is that substreams themselves are a really efficient extraction method. They are, sometimes better than even you running a node yourself, but they are challenging to build and consume from. So for example, in today's world, you'd have to write Rust code. You'd have to really get deep into Firehose, which is sort of the architecture that makes up substreams. Substream SQL makes it possible to just write in SQL. And so you have a much simpler, more elegant user experience. So one of our core dev teams, Masari, has already been using the Substream SQL work, and they don't really want to go back to substreams directly. So it's really exciting to see that this has, product market fit already, even though we haven't quite launched. And the goal being that, ClickHouse is the sink and the database that we highlight here, but it really could be any database that the team wants to use. So in Masari's use case, they really wanted to prioritize really quick real-time data, and their backend is mainly focused around SQL, so and ClickHouse. And so this was really an optimal use case for them. But we're going to see a lot of different teams use variations of different kinds of syncs with the Substream SQL data service. The third data service that we're highlighting this month is file hosting service. So the main use case here is actually for indexers. In theory, longer term, we could definitely enable this for end users, but the goal is to make it more efficient for indexers to share the data that they need to serve queries. So for example, some indexers right now, or not only indexers, chain teams share archive data or snapshots, which can be pretty inefficient. And it's not necessarily incentivized as well. And so one of the exciting things about this data service is that it's actually not only for the developer user as we've typically served, but indexers can really reduce their latency and even maybe their costs, and also create a lot more collaboration between indexers as they'll be sharing that data between each other. Max highlighted a little bit of the billing improvements that have been made, but really we're starting to get focused on the different kinds of users and the different billing that they would need. So a lot of this work is from Edge and Node and the Graph Studio, and really separating, the free user that needs the free tier. Maybe they're just testing out the graph. They're looking to see, what data service makes the most sense. Then we've got the growth user, which needs, a larger amount of queries. They probably want to pre-fill their wallet because they know they'll need that cash basically to pay for those queries. And then we've got those other users that, maybe they're a bit hesitant to use crypto fully, and so they're more interested in paying in fiat. And so our goal really is to serve all these payments, make it really seamless. So whichever user type and preference, you're able to use the Graph network. One of the other exciting areas related to protocol evolution and resiliency, which goes a little bit understated, is making payments more efficient between gateways and indexers. So this is sort of more of a back-end detail, but it can really open the door to more decentralization in the sense that we can now enable more gateways to exist with their own kind of functionalities. And that also then enables gateways to be very specific to data services. So indexers will be able to get paid, and the trust between the gateways and the indexers decreases. So basically enabling much more trustless payments. And this is really setting us up for scaling to that world of data services and some of the other decentralization efforts, such as decentralized arbitration. One of the more exciting ones that you've probably heard about is Horizon. And we actually just released a really exciting blog post in the last few weeks and forum post that's really detailing what the vision of Horizon is. And TLDR is we want the Graph network to be more permissionless, more decentralized. And in order to do that, we're taking a more staking-centric approach where we're going to be tweaking some of the mechanisms in the protocol to make it more secure and more permissionless. So for example, allocated stake potentially being slashable, enabling more decentralized arbitration, and basically allowing anybody to be able to launch a data service, not just core devs. And so what's exciting about this is that we're already seeing a lot of iterations of the data services that we've launched. So for example, people want to build on top of Substreams, they want to build their own Substreams data service. We're seeing different kinds of data, such as shadow or gasless event data coming about. So all of these things, in theory, could be launched by anyone in the Web3 ecosystem, and the Graph becoming more of that shelling point and marketplace for everyone to launch those data services without really requiring any kind of permission from core devs. And then we'll just share a little bit about the ongoing GIPs for those who aren't following in the forum. So as Max mentioned, our focus has really been on finishing layer 2 migration and also getting ready for Horizon and any changes that need to occur into the protocol there. So maybe going from right to left, just because right is completed. I believe all of these have actually just been approved by the council, which is really exciting. Permissionless payer is a dependency for Scalar Tap. And then the other two are really just efficiency improvements to make it easier for indexers and delegators to interact with the protocol. In the candidate proposals is us moving the L2 migration to 100%. So we had a really successful migration in Q4 that got us to about 95%. And so now we're quite ready to make that final push. And then in the draft spec, so that's scalar tap. As I mentioned, this is a really exciting project to reduce the trust between gateways and indexers. So that's on deck. And then we're already starting to see some of the horizon ideas come through, such as indexing fees. Cool.
Super.
We'll pass it on to Etienne.
Thank you so much, Eva. Hey guys, hi. I think we can switch to the next slide. Yeah. So I wanted first to give you a bit of background about some example of who are the consumer of subgraph. So on the last quarter, we give a shout out to Playground Analytics. This quarter, we wanted to give some highlight to Snapshot Labs. And I'm sure you know that you have been either user of it if you have been a voter on any sort of dApps. They have about 8,000 applications, and they are one of the biggest voting protocol which do allow user to not have to use any gas. So this is quite key. They do use subgraph because if you want to actually have some insight around voting, you need to get some information, and subgraph help to read and track also data. So for the next slide. So yeah, so one thing which I've been super keen on is to see that we have launched in Q4 two DAO. So the first one, which is led with Orion, is called InfraDAO. They are a white label GRT staking service. And I think one of the key things that they solve is that what we heard around the SEX and the custodian is that it's quite difficult for them to find time and also team to either do some integration with the recent change to Arbitrum. Hence, you know, working with such a great team like the InfraDAO has been great. They offer one of the best type of tools. They also have very low fee. They have some SLA very close to some enterprise, and they have been able, you know, to work with you know some of the top names. For the next slide. The next DAO is the one called Builders DAO. So they are solving one issue, which is like if you want to write some subgraph, it's actually okay. But if you want to have you know some of the top-notch subgraph, this requires quite a long time and does require some expertise to do it well. Hence, you know, having an ecosystem that helps to create content as well as give some support is super key. The team has done such a great job that, you know, if you're a dev and want to have some support around to build some subgraph, definitely please get in touch. Next. Yeah. One other tool is Launchpad Kubernetes that was launched by the core dev GraphOps. So one thing that we are seeing is that if you are new to run some indexer, is actually quite challenging. It does require time. If you also want to have some of the modern containerizer services, it can be quite hard. Hence, the team has created a toolkit to make it very easy to launch some new bootstrapping in Texture. Next slide. we have made also some announcement that we have launched what we called a TAB. And so the TAB is a group of some of the top mind that support question around some R&D. And so they are here ready to work with the council on one side, but also to work with the team as well as the community. And they are really here to review GIPs, to give also their thought and support on some of the topics that may come here once we launch around the world of data. And yeah, it has been great to work with them. And finally, I'm sure that you have been to the House of Web3. In SF, I think we have done about 300 plus events for the past year. It's such a great place. We have launched at the beginning of this year one NFT with a great team at Unlock. And so if you want to have it, it gives you some access to some great event. You can pay in crypto and in fiat, and yeah, just get in touch with the team at Agent Node. Thank you very much. Thank you, Max.
Thanks, Etienne. So let's talk about network stats. The gateway runs an algorithm called indexer selection algorithm, ISA. The ISA matches consumer budget and indexer cost model. Indexers set their minimum price per query via cost model written in a programming language called Agora. Then Gateway sets maximum query fee budget once they receive consumer query request. So indexers are only selected if they charge less than the query fee budget. So it's a basic function of marginal demand versus marginal supply. So there are a range of factors that a gateway considers in selecting indexers, such as geographic proximity, such as latency, quality service, and others. In essence, the ISA selects the best indexers to serve consumer queries on a real-time basis. Because query fee is a very small portion of indexers' income currently, they're not very sensitive to pricing at this moment. In other words, it's currently a buyer's market for queries, so move to the network, please. And pricing is mostly determined by gateway pricing algorithm. So one big change in fourth quarter was what we call volume discounting curve. Previously, the ISA had a discounting curve that disproportionately benefited high volume dApps and penalized smaller dApps. We completely overhauled the mechanism in early October, so the pricing for larger and smaller dApps fall in similar ranges. Then we made another change in December that had smaller impact on pricing. So one thing to note is that in early January, we shifted the budget back to about $30 per million queries to reflect where we want to be strategically. So pricing is one of the most complex and technical areas on the network. So I understand it is a lot of information to take in, but the simple takeaway here is that we're tweaking the ISA, but $30 per million queries is where we want to be in the next few months, depending on market conditions. So let's go to the next slide. Let's take a look at query volume. So query volume grew 65% quarter over quarter and 71% year over year. As mentioned, from first quarter 22 to fourth quarter 23, query volume grew by an annualized rate of about 121%. The growth is driven by both the increase in subgraph deployments and increased consumption by larger projects. Particularly, we see increased adoption for larger projects. So it's actually a little bit nuanced. Once these projects are on the protocol, we typically first see a decrease in volume versus hosted service due to best practice optimization, such as client-side caching. But over time, their usage does tend to grow, which speaks to the value proposition of the network. Then subgraph deployments, the chart on the right, subgraph deployments queried increased by 12% quarter over quarter and 110% year over year. This metric points to subgraph deployed that are actually queried, since sometimes developers deploy a subgraph, but not necessarily follow up with queries. In terms of larger subgraph data consumers, we see a mix of DeFi, cross-chain bridges, and governance protocols. So in terms of subgraph growth, active subgraph count grew 16% quarter over quarter and 122% year over year. Since first quarter of 22, active subgraphs grew at an annualized rate of about 101%. In terms of subgraph creation, we've had 3 consecutive quarters of over 300 subgraphs created every quarter. So we can also see now that vast majority of new subgraphs are created on L2. In terms of active data consumers, so the number of active paying data consumers grew 44% year over year and reached 219 in December. We define active paying data consumer as those who were billed and paid more than 0 GRT on-chain for the past 30 days. The chart on the right shows the number of data consumers with more than 10 million queries per month. It reached 10 in December. Depending on use cases, we do see quite a lot of volatility in volume. So one consumer may be paying more than 10 million in queries, but next month it may not be in this category. So rather than having a consistent volume every month, many projects do exhibit kind of seasonal or non-seasonal volatility, which makes projection pretty difficult. But overall, we see a positive trend. Okay, so let's talk about inflation. This is my favorite slide, by the way. We frequently hear that GRT is a high inflation token, which is not true. People may conflate delegation yield with the actual inflation of the token. We see many indexers offer 10% delegation yield or 10% plus. The high yield is driven by the fact that only about 1/3 of GRT is staked. So inflation rewards flows disproportionately to staked GRT. The chart here shows that realized inflation in 2023, which is only about 2.7%. We have a little over 3% of organic inflation. Then burns and inefficiencies in protocol had a very minor offsetting effect. One thing to note is that inefficiencies in the protocol, such as curation tax, were designed to achieve specific behavioral outcome and not to offset inflation. So their effects tend to be pretty small overall. And one complexity is inflation on L1 and L2. As mentioned last year, the protocol moved to L2, and now it operates on both L1 and L2. The issuance mechanism works like this. So L1 block rate determines the issuance on both L1 and L2. The issuance only happens when indexers close allocations on valid subgraphs. So the issuance is actually nonlinear and tend to jump on discrete increments. Then the issuance rate is about 12 seconds. Well, actually exactly 12 seconds on L1. Previously it was about 13 seconds when was a proof of stake, which is 12 seconds is the speed of L1 block rate. And then it varies on L2, but it's still around 12 seconds on L2. Total issuance right now, it's up to about 121 GRT per L1 block. So currently it's about 6 GRT per block on L1 and 115 GRT per block on L2. So hopefully it brings more clarity on inflation. Last but not least, the graph console has the sole authority to change issuance rate. So let's switch to quality of service. There are many ways to look at quality of service. The ones we highlighted here are query success rate and latency. So many of you know when the protocol was launched, we struggled to deliver consistent quality of service. Over the past 2 years, we've done substantial amount of work to improve, and now these metrics look very good. For example, query success rate is about 99.7% in fourth quarter. Over the past 4 quarters, we only have 1 quarter, it dropped below 99%, and it was 98.9% in second quarter this past year. Then latency metrics, our median latency was 123 milliseconds in fourth quarter. P90, which is the 90 percentile for latency, is 371, and P95 is 523. So latency is driven by many factors, one of which is the complexity of queries and also the relative location of data centers. So it is hard to compare latency across different solutions. Nonetheless, this latency profile is very, very good versus what we observe elsewhere. And the network is not only consistent, it is also very, very fast. let's spend a minute on indexers and delegators. In terms of execution, we haven't been focusing on these numbers for a while now. We have more than enough indexers to deliver high quality service. So our focus is to bring more queries onto the network. But in terms of number of staked indexers, it was 173 at the end of fourth quarter. The number continued to decline following a surge during MIPS. Then we've done some experimental analysis on the distribution of indexers across different geographies. We estimate that we have about 70% of indexers in Americas, then the rest split between Europe and Asia, about, I would say, 2/3 in Europe and 1/3 in Asia. In general, we haven't done a good job expanding in the Asian market, but we're doing more work this year. If you're based in Asia or have a strong presence there, please reach out. We'd love to collaborate. Then active delegator count continued to surge due to a very successful learn and earn campaign on Coinbase. One thing to note is that following the transition to L2, we had a lot of micro delegations, which massively increased delegator count, but had minimal impact on delegation stakes. So I wouldn't read too much into the chart on the right. With that, let me turn it over to Tegan.
Thank you, Max. Hi, everyone. It's great to see all of you on this call. Thanks for joining. So our North Star has changed from getting 80% of the, we can go back to the last slide, please. From 80% of the total traffic, getting that over to the network from the hosted service. We've now increased that to 100% of traffic over to the network. The reason we've been able to increase that is because of our strategy around the Sunrise. So the Sunrise will enable us to move all of the traffic over to the decentralized network. Once the Sunrise is complete, we will then start to focus on GRT query fees as our North Star, where we really focus on increasing the total addressable market for the Graph network. Just kind of double clicking into the why. So we're really enabling Web3 use cases with this unbreakable data layer with the Graph. And we really want to enable this flourishing community without any vendor lock of applications or usage of those applications. And as Max mentioned, we kicked off the Sunrise. So just like we promised we would, we are now in the first phase of the Sunrise and we're executing on that plan. And we plan to complete the Sunrise in the coming months. As Eva highlighted, we improved the billing. So we're simplifying that. There was a comment in the chat around all of that converting in the background. And that's exactly right. If Stripe is taken, fiat payments are taken, that'll all convert to GRT in the background. And then also the upgrade window. So we'll kick that off in the coming months. And once that's complete, Sunrise will be completed and all of that hosted service traffic will upgrade to the network and the hosted service will kind of be in the rear view mirror, but upgraded to the network. We've definitely been kind of combating some of the bad behavior we're seeing that's not really aligned around our vision or our values. We want to ensure that there's no one to rug your application or your API. So just like Anthony Antonopoulos says, not your keys, not your crypto, not your subgraph, not your application. And that's why you need the Graph network. We'll be coming out with an important update soon that I would love to get your feedback on. So if you have interest in sharing feedback on that, please get in touch with me and I'll be reaching out to many of you to chat about that. As Max mentioned, there was a hiccup on pricing. I know many of you have asked about pricing in the past, and it's like, how much is a query? And it's like 0.001, GRT. Now pricing is much cleaner. So the indexers aren't setting those prices. It's $30 per 1 million queries. So it's very clean, neat, easy to understand. And as Max highlighted, volumes are up substantially. So we saw 958 million queries in Q4 alone on the decentralized network. I remember back when we launched the hosted service, we celebrated 1 billion queries on the hosted service, and we've surpassed that on the decentralized network. And no forward-looking statements, but it looks like we'll surpass 1 billion queries in Q1 alone. So I'm excited for next quarter or this quarter. And we saw 85% quarter-over-quarter growth on query volume. And then as Eva mentioned, we're working towards enabling these data services on the decentralized network. We've seen a lot of data needs expand in Web3, and the Graph network is here to enable all of those data needs or serve all those data needs. We put out a Horizon post by Pablo that's really excellent. If you haven't read that, please make sure to take a deep dive and read it. and feel free to ask any questions or comment. Horizon is very much a work in progress, so we really want your feedback. Nothing is deployed yet, so we're excited to hear from you. And then L2 transfer was a big feat. Thank you everyone for providing feedback on that, but we've lowered gas costs for interacting and participating in the Graph network right in time for the bull market. So with that, we can go to the next slide. I just want to kind of highlight some of our priorities for Q1. So kicking off the Sunbeam phase, improving billing, making progress on those new data services that I mentioned, and of course, additional chain integrations. If there are any chains that you know of that you want to see incorporated in the Graph or supported by the Graph network, please get in touch with us. And as always, our main focus is increasing GRT query fees and usage on the decentralized network.
Thanks, Tegan. Let's go to the next slide. Right, the thank you section. And thank you, Craig and Michael, always, of Reciprocal Ventures for the continued support and guidance. Thank you to Aditya and the South Park Commons team on the L2 transfer feedback. Thank you to Richard and the DACM team for the feedback on the Graphs tokenomics. And thank you to Brendan Mint on Coinbase Ventures for the delegation conversations. And thank you to John Choi again on the Asia strategy. And thank you, Tiger Global, for your guidance. Then in terms of how you can help, of course, as you know, we still have 17% of stake on L1. Please move your delegation stake to L2 if you haven't already. Then always delegate to the Graph to help secure the network. We do have quite a bit of hiring needs, so the key positions are listed here. Then, as always, please amplify the Sunrise plan. Then come to co-create at House Web3. We have an NFT available. If you haven't purchased, please do purchase. Then with that, let me turn it over to Caroline for Q&A.
Yes, thank you everyone for your questions so far. And if you think of anything else, feel free to drop it in the chat as well. We can answer it. So the first question, there has been off and on discussion in the community about making changes to the issuance rates. Are those discussions potentially moving forward to increase the token issuance rate? So I believe Max answered this question with the inflation slide, but please let us know if there's any other questions here. Okay, moving on, next question. The Horizon staking-centric protocol is very interesting. When were these changes implemented and how has it positively impacted delegation? Eva or Max, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can speak to this. So as Tegan mentioned, this is still very much work in progress. We just released a blog post and a forum post in the last few weeks to share with the community and the council and start getting feedback. And it will be sort of a slow moving process in the sense that there will be various GIPs that occur in tandem to the protocol existing. And then at some point, things will start to transfer over. But we would love to get your feedback. There's consideration around more of a brownfield approach versus a greenfield approach. Both have their trade-offs, but this is still very much in the works and will be focused on over the next year.
Thanks, Eva. Next question, where can the toolkit Etienne mentioned be found for bootstrapping? So it's linked in the docs. I'll link it in the chat here. And also direct doc via the Grab ops, which I'll also drop in the chat.
Yeah, one more thing. So the toolkit is officially called Launchpad. So if you have any questions, index or office hours are the best place to ask those live, or you can try and tag someone from the Graph Ops team in our Discord.
Next question. This one was answered in the chat, but we'll just repeat it here. Was it decided who got accepted into the technical advisory board? And Eva answered that yes, they will be announced in the forum shortly. We have one more question. Where does the volatility in high volume data consumers come from? You mentioned seasonal or non-seasonal, but there is a positive trend. Max.
Yeah, overall, I'd say there is a positive trend, not on every single customer, obviously, but overall, we do see a positive trend. It depends on use cases. For example, governance tend to be seasonal. Then it goes with the overall crypto market as well. Sometimes, crypto market has higher volume. The DeFi use cases could have higher volume. So.
And a question from Derek in the chat. Do we have a projected time frame on the free query plan?
Coming soon. We don't have a specific deadline just because it does take engineering resources. So expect that soon. It's part of the sunrise phases.
Any other questions? Well, thanks for the time, everyone. We will be sending out a recap of this call and also the link to the recording shortly. So thank you so much, and we'll see you for the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you.
Thank you.